And welcome back. As you can see, we've got our engine on our engine stand in here, and the previous parts of this series thus far has just been removing this engine from our 2012 Red Ram, our project vehicle, otherwise known as Candy Apple, or Project X if you remember from a previous build series. But what we want to do is start tearing this motor down into the short block in order to prep it to go to the machine shop so they can do their work they need to do. We can get it back and then build it back up into the long block. Now, earlier I had mentioned, and when we pulled the VVT solenoid out of the center valley here, you'll note, if you remember from the previous video, it had a little bit of metal flake on it, a little bit of glitter. And also, when this engine sits idle or sits basically not used in the driveway for an extended period of time, the first couple of ignitions, you can hear a pretty loud clank to it until the oil pressure builds up. And if you key cycle it a couple of times or run it through a couple of drive cycles, usually that'll go away, as long as you every couple of days get out there and kind of start the engine or use it. So my theory is, I think we're going to find out that we're starting to get lifter failure on this engine, but again, we'll discover it together when we get in there. So the first thing I want to do is see about getting the oil drained out of the oil pan. That has not been done yet. Once that's complete, I'll bring you back, and the first thing that I want to do is see about getting our ignition coils out. We'll go ahead and save these ignition coils as test coils and or replacement coils. We know that they're all good on this particular build, because again, this engine did start and it did run, at least from an ignition standpoint, without an issue. So we'll get these off, we'll save them. That'll allow us to loosen up the bolts on our valve cover and get our valve cover out. We're going to leave the spark plugs in for the time being. We'll probably take those out in a little bit later, but for now, what we want to do again is get the oil drain, get our coils out, and then that'll give us a look at the underside of kind of what at least the rocker arms look like. So that'll start to give us a little bit of view into health of the engine. One thing that we are hoping that we do not see is like a lot of gummy residue or gummy paste. We want it to look, hopefully it'll look like the individual who had this truck before us, took good care of the motor and kept up with their oil changes. So I'm going to go ahead and get to work to getting the oil drained out of this block, and then I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we got the oil drained. I didn't see like any big metal chunks or anything in the oil, nothing that looked too alarming. In case you're curious, it's 10 millimeter on the coil pack bolts. Old school Craftsman ratchet. You know it's an old school when it still has USA or Made in the USA stamped on it. Probably had this ratchet well over 25 years at this point. Like I said, I'm just going to toss the coils off to the side. Because they still work, they're still good. We'll make good test coils and or replacement coils on the fly or in a pinch. If you remember, we're going back just like we did with our 2009 build. We're going back with all new NGK coils. So it'll be NGK coils, spark plugs, and oxygen sensors. And these bolts are somewhat captive to the coil. They usually won't come all the way out of the coil. Sometimes you get one that they will actually thread all the way out. Yes, and in case you haven't watched or haven't looked at a Hemi before, it is 2 spark plugs per cylinder. So when you're doing spark plugs On a Hemi, you need 16 spark plugs. That's done for various reasons. Efficiency being one of them. Making sure they get a correct burn of fuel. Things of that nature. Okay, the bolts in the valve cover are captive. And they're also set up in such a way that you can only torque them down so tight. After a while, they will stop. And it's done that way intentionally to keep you from over torquing the valve covers. These are 8 millimeters, in case you're curious. So what provides your seal on these valve covers is not the clamping force of these bolts. It is the rubber gasket that goes around the perimeter of this valve cover. And in case you've watched the other build series on this channel before, you know we like to do something unique to our valve covers when we go to reinstall them after we get them cleaned up. And we'll be doing the same thing here. And that means that we will be getting these cleaned up, prepped, thoroughly degreased, and they will be getting a coat of orange paint. Just kind of I started doing that on the 2500, on the very first Hemi build that we did, mainly just to kind of signify that we tend to put a couple of Hellcat engine parts into this build. And when I say Hellcat, I mean just like the lifters we're putting in, you may hear them referred to as quote-unquote Hellcat lifters. And what they are is basically non-MDS Mopar lifters. They just happen to be used in a Hellcat motor. And they've kind of just adopted the name of Hellcat lifter. Plus, we'll be putting in a Hellcat oil pump off of a Hellcat. As well as the non-MDF lifters. Different cams. So, I don't know. Just kind of like to clean things up and dress them up a little bit. Make them a little bit unique. Make them stand out a little bit. And you'll notice that these bolts won't actually come out of where these washers are because they are captive. And you can pull them out, but you'll end up pulling out the whole assembly. So you'll get both washers and the rubber insert and everything will come off in one piece. Yes, I know this would be faster if I had maybe some power tools. But I don't have very many power tools, surprisingly. The only real electric tool that I have is a couple of DeWalt drills, DeWalt impact driver, and of course I got a 1/2-inch old, back when Sears used to be around, a 1/2-inch electric impact from Sears. That unfortunately is discontinued. Obviously they don't make it anymore. Sears isn't around anymore, and they don't make the batteries for it anymore either. So when the battery goes kaput and you can't get a hold of third-party replacements anymore, that will be the end of the tool, unfortunately. I'm going to see if I can just pull up on this. Sometimes you can get these to pull up. Sometimes, yeah, like this one's on there pretty good just from age. Let me go grab a mini pry bar and I'll be right back. And welcome back. So I'm just going to find a small spot, like maybe right here, to pry against. Actually, I'm going to go right here, down here underneath the exhaust. Let's see. And there's not a good spot. Just trying to get between the cylinder head and the valve cover. Just trying to find a good spot to bite it. There we go. I don't know if you can hear that. There we go. Obviously there's our valve cover, and that's what I was saying earlier. See, these bolts are captive. What provides your seal are the spark plug well seals and the perimeter gasket. And nice. Okay, looks good. It doesn't look terrible in here at all. It looks nice and clean. This is what I wanted to see. I'm not seeing a lot of sludge, things of that nature, you know, anything that would, you know, lead me to believe, at least thus far, that it wasn't taken care of or didn't have routine oil changes. So this is nice. So the next thing we'll do while we're on this side is that we'll come through here and buzz these rocker shafts off. And you can always tell the intake rocker shaft from the exhaust, in case you're ever curious. Obviously, you can tell by looking that these valves are intake valves, but you'll notice the intake rocker has a little letter I etched, or a part of each arm that pushes down on the valve assembly. So I'm going to go ahead and start breaking these loose as well, and then I'll bring you right back. One moment. And welcome back. So I'm just getting everything untorqued. I usually just follow the same pattern that it is when you torque them in order to release torque. Not sure if it matters one way or another, but I know these rocker shafts, you know, depending on where the cam is at in its position, you know, some of these valves are going to be various states of being open / closed. So you might have a little bit more tension on some of these bolts than others when you go to take them out. So just be mindful of that. In case you're curious, the book I have says that when you install these, they get torqued to 16 foot-pounds. Okay, so that is our intake rocker shaft on our passenger side. Just going to put that down in our parts bucket for now. And again, so I'm going to continue with this. Now, normally you can see we got to push, obviously, our intake push rods here. Normally, if you were going to reassemble this and you were keeping those push rods and lifters, maybe you were just doing head work or had some valve work to do and you were going to keep the lifters and the push rods underneath, you would normally take these out, and I've done this before. Just get yourself a box, mark all 8 cylinders, intake and exhaust, and that way you can kind of keep and just push this through the appropriate spot in the box, and that way you can kind of keep track of which rod came from which cylinder, because you're trying to keep those worn parts that have worn, you're trying to keep those parts that have worn together, married and staying together. But in this case, we know what we're going to be doing is that we're going to be replacing pretty much all the hardware that's in here. We're not going to be keeping the push rods or the existing lifters or anything of that nature. So I'm just going to go ahead and just take these out and just kind of toss them to the side. But in case you're curious, you know, you can see the locations of the intakes and the exhausts rods, and we'll cover this a bit more when we do the assembly. It's not too terribly difficult. It's just being mindful that you don't inadvertently, you know, put a rod in the wrong location or put a rod in, you know, up in a corner where it's not actually supposed to go. You'll find out real quick when you go to start the engine. But anyway, I'm rambling too much. Let me get these parts out of here and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see we got our both intake and exhaust rockers off at this point. And before we crack this cylinder head loose, what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing to the other side, just to get that into a further state of disassembly. Because one thing that will happen is that we're going to need to change out our drip pan below here, because when we crack this cylinder head loose, we're going to get a lot of coolant that's going to want to come out with it. So what I want to do is get the valve cover and rocker arms and everything off on the other side, just so we can get kind of a look and seeing how, make sure that that side looks as clean as it does in this side, and and hopefully they will. So I'm going to pause you real quick. I'm going to go ahead and take care of that other side, and I'll be right back. One moment. And welcome back. So we just got the valve cover, obviously the coil packs on the valve cover off on here on our driver's side, and you can see this side looks really, really clean as well. So I'm happy to see that. That tells me they kept up with at least their oil change maintenance on this. And then hopefully we won't find anything else too drastic in here. I'm really hoping it's just a lifter issue that we found and not anything on the bottom end, but like I said, if that becomes the case, then we know we're sending the short block to the machine shop anyway. We're just going to get new pistons and the whole 9 yards put into the lower end of it. But either way, I'm going to continue to get these intakes and rockers off of this side as well. And then I'll bring you back. And I think what we'll do next when I bring you back is we're going to start getting the front timing cover off in order to make just a bit more room. I mean, you can get the cylinder heads to clear the timing cover, but it's a bit easier if we take the timing cover off first and then just kind of get this big old hunk of metal you see here in the lower left-hand corner of your screen kind of out of the way, and it just makes accessing things a bit easier. So, like I said, I'm going to get these intake and exhaust rocker shafts off, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So obviously we're sitting here looking at the front of the engine at this point, and I went ahead and just cracked our crank bolt loose and then put it back in about 5 or 6 threads or so, because what we're going to do is we're going to put a wheel puller on that. We're going to push against that crank bolt to help us get this out. Now, if you haven't dealt with these before, they're kind of cone styled. You can see it kind of comes to a point in the back. And right here where you can see my finger is the little lip, and they make a tool that goes in through these holes and then grabs hold of that lip and pulls it out. And you can, if you have that tool, great, use it. If not, I just use a standard 3-jaw puller that you see here, and I just reversed the jaws on it to point the other direction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and put one hook through each of these little oblong holes here and see if I can grab, either grab this inside lip or this inside lip of this pulley and then pull it out that way. I usually go through, I think I usually go through here, or I usually go through the smaller oblong holes. It may be the smaller oblong holes, but let me get this set up and get some tension on this, and then I'll show you what I'm talking about. Also, let me just go ahead and take this crank bolt out of here. I want to show you, somebody's definitely been in here before. See all that gouge marks on the outside diameter of that pulley? Somebody's had something up against here before, probably trying to get this off, or whatever they used to get this off and or back on last time. But they did a pretty good job of gouging up that surface. So hopefully they didn't gouge up the inside bore of this crank pulley, and we can get it off and it's not all scarred up, because if it is, then that means if it's got deep grooves cut into the friction fit, the mating surface of that pulley on the crankshaft, then we'll have to get a new crankshaft. Remember, this is not the pulley that's going back on. What's going back on this engine is the ATI dampener, because we need a 2-pulley setup on this crank, because the supercharger is going to be driven by its own separate pulley, and then the accessories will have the other pulley. So let me go ahead and get this set up and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So hopefully you can see that in there. It did go into the smaller oblong holes, but hopefully you can see that one right there where that hook just kind of goes this way and bites on the, you may not be able to see it from this side, but it can basically hooks this way and bites on the inside lip of that hole. So all we got to do now that we've got a little bit of tension on here to hold this in place, is just to, and I believe there's a 15 millimeter on the end of that particular puller, so we'll just put a 15 millimeter 1/2-inch socket on it, and we'll start putting some pressure on it and see if we can get this pulley to start backing off of here. Let's see. Let me get you set up on the tripod, and I can at least show you that shot, and you know we can look at this together. One moment. And welcome back. So it looks like I got you in the shot there. Let's see if we can get it to crack loose without putting an impact on it. Usually what I like to do is just kind of hold the three jaws kind of where they need to be until you get pressure on it like we do now, and then it'll just kind of hold itself. Oh, yep, see, we lost a claw on that side, which is why we lost our pressure. You're gonna kind of just got to back out and reset. So what I'm doing is actually loosening up the clamp to get those jaws to bite in a bit more securely. And then we'll go back and kind of hold this in place and again put some tension back on it. Oh, yep, this bottom one's slipping again. It's not held in the right spot. So I'm going to kind of play with this because it's going to be a little bit of a Jenga move until I can get this pulley to start to move, and then I'll bring it back. But that's basically the gist of it. You're just kind of holding this apparatus in place until you get enough tension on it that these claws will hold themselves and bite, and then you can start backing it out. But I'll bring you right back. And welcome back. So we've gotten it to bite, and we've gotten it to move. If you might not be able to tell until I can get a bit more turns on here, but it is backing out. Now what's going to happen eventually, we're going to back out on our mounting nut that we're pushing against, and we'll have to take our jaws off, back our bolt out a couple of threads, or what we could do is also put a socket in here as well and just push against the socket against the crankshaft. And as you can see here, yeah, it's doing nice. And of course we've bottomed out on our original mounting bolt. Just take the pressure off, and we'll see how many threads that we've got left on there. Yeah, we got a few threads. We can back it out, and it still has a comfortable bite inside the crankshaft itself. So we're just going to reset like we did before, back it out. Hopefully it's enough now to finish getting the pulley out at this point. If not, then we'll have to just take our bolt out, and like I said, I usually just like to put a socket in there if it needs it and just push against the socket. There we go. Now that bottom one's in there. Okay, so rather than having you watch me fight getting this thing into position, and most of the fight is because this isn't the actual puller to be doing this with, but like I said, it'll work. You may have to just fidget with it. I'm going to continue to fidget with this, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we got a few more turns on that and got it out a little bit further, but I think it may be loose enough at this point that if we take our bolt out, we can probably wiggle it the rest of the way off. Let's get our puller out of there. Get our mounting bolt out. Nope, nope, not quite yet. Needs just a little bit more. We got a little bit more we can pull against that factory bolt before it gets too shallow as far as being threaded into the crank for my liking. Okay, once again, bring right back, one moment. And welcome back. So we got it pulled out a little bit further using the factory, backing out the factory bolt a little bit to push against it. But as you can see, once you get to the end of it, it kind of just falls off because this is just a, a friction fit. And the good thing is I don't see any scoring on the crankshaft itself, which is nice. That's what we're looking for. So again, just to show you, all we did, we were just pushing against the factory crank bolt. Just in like that, put it in a good, 4 or 5 turns, make sure it's got a good bite on the inside of the crank, and then just using the 3-jar puller to push against this bolt and therefore pull the pulley off. So what we can do next is, and remember we've got work to do to this crank as well because it'll have to be pinned for that ATI pulley in order to support the superchargers. So we got a lot, like I said, I guess the short way of saying we got a lot of work to do yet. Okay, so what I want to do next is start getting the bolts taken out for this timing cover, and then be able to mark these. If I recall correctly, I think I believe you got obviously 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and a 6th one here at the very top. I want to say, I think these 4 here are all the same size. And then this one here, up here at the top, let me pan you up here. We'll be able to tell a difference in that one when we go to put it together, because I think this is the only one that's got like a shoulder on it and the rest do not. So let me get a get ready to get a drip pan in here, because this will drip some coolant. And of course, don't forget, you also have these 4 bolts across the front of the oil pan that also go into the bottom of this timing cover that need to come off as well. So let me get the cracking on taking some bolts out of here, and I'll bring you back. One moment. Oh, and in case you're curious, the cam position sensor doesn't have to come out in order to take the cover off. So I'm going to get to work on this. I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we're just in the process. We got our drip pan in place. Just in the process of removing our timing cover bolts. And one thing I normally do on these is I usually take like a Sharpie or something and just color the bolts, like green, black, whatever, silver, whatever color you want to use. Just also mark it on the timing cover itself, because these are what they consider the timing cover bolts. 2 here at the bottom, 2 here, 1 here, 1 at the top, which I'll get up there and show you in a bit, unless I can find it by feel here. You'll see like a little black claw looking metal brace that goes between here and the cylinder head, as well as the oil pan bolts, and those are considered your timing cover bolts. And everything else, to include this one, which I made a mistake on this one of my builds before, where I thought I had a bolt missing there, and it's not. That's actually one of the ones that goes to the water pump. But these are the ones that are considered timing covers, so when you're reinstalling your timing cover, those are the ones they have you put in first. But we're going to be washing and scrubbing down this timing cover to get rid of a lot of this dirt. So in lieu of marking the cover with a Sharpie, I'm just going to use this camera, as well as I've already kind of taken pictures of it to just kind of remember for record keeping sake, where our bolts are at. So again, we got these 2 here, these 2 here, this one here, our oil pan across the bottom, and then our 1 bolt, bracing bolt there at the top. So far we've gotten the 2 bottom ones out. And they are, as I remember, they are the same size bolt. So I'm going to continue to remove the rest of these bolts, and I'll bring you back and show them to you. I believe they're all the same size with the exception of this one and the one at the top. But I'll bring you right back. One moment. And welcome back. So as you can see, we've got our timing cover bolts out. And just to show those to you, 4 of the bolts are the same size. So the only one that is different of the ones that make up the timing cover is this one here. And you can see it's got a shank on it. The other ones do not. And this one's just a little bit shorter than the rest. And that's the one that goes up here where you'll see a metal retaining sleeve that it goes into. And it actually goes through a sleeve, and to show you here, bolts into the driver's side cylinder head through that metal sleeve there. Also took off the little claw piece that went between the driver's side cylinder head and the top of the timing cover, where that bolted right there. And that is this piece here. This little Y-shaped piece, I guess you can call it, a brace. And it's 2 bolts. So at this point, we should be able to maybe give this cover a couple of love taps. And what I'll do is I'm going to go get a rubber mallet and just kind of tap gingerly on the side of this to get that seal to break, and we should be good. And we did take our 4 oil pan bolts off the bottom ones. These are the ones that go up through the oil pan into the timing cover. Again, you've got 3 here, plus you've got 1 on each side. So let me go get a rubber mallet and I'll bring you back. One moment. Hey, welcome back. Got you set back up on the tripod, jacked up a little bit, and also zoomed in. And all I'm going to do is, well, first I'm going to get this pry bar out of here. And I'm just going to give this cover a couple of taps, and it should start to spill fluid once we know we get that seal to start to break itself free. Yeah, I can see the cover moving already. Yeah. I don't know if you can see that seam right there starting to widen up and give way. Ooh, no coolant. Surprising. Must have all dripped out when we were in the process of taking the engine out of the vehicle. But there you go. That whole big metal monstrosity is considered your timing cover and accessory mounts. You know, for your alternator and idler pulleys and things of that nature. Big old chunk of metal, or I should say big old chunk of aluminum. Okay, so beautiful. So we get our first look at the inside of things here. And let me get you out of the stand and show you this. Glad we took this apart, because we're definitely going to want to change this. One moment. And welcome back. So got you in front here, and obviously this is our oil pump. This is our tensioner for our timing chain. But look at this right here. Look at this guide. Notice that it's completely plastic. That is the older revision. The newer revision, this is now made out of metal, and it has like a nylon top on it that the chain rides against. These are very prone to breaking. And once they break, obviously your chain has enough slack at that point that it can jump time. And if it jumps time, then your valves and your pistons going to be like Romeo and Juliet. They're finally going to be able to meet and embrace one another, and it's not going to end well when it does. All right, so that's a good thing. So again, we got, if you saw in the previous video, we got all new timing components, which includes that updated guide. So we'll definitely be getting that piece of plastic out of there. So let's see. Let's go ahead and get you repositioned. And we'll see about getting the cylinder heads off of here next. Now, what we may do is just go ahead and see about dropping the exhaust manifolds first before we take the cylinder heads off, just because it would be easier to break these bolts free and allow us to get a little bit of torque on them when they're still kind of mounted to the block. So let me get you set back up and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we're just in the process on our passenger side here of taking our exhaust off, and the first thing we did was drop the heat shield, and lo and behold, the stereotypical Hemi exhaust manifold broken bolt. And we've run into this before. It's unfortunately kind of a common issue depending on what year of RAM that you got. So hopefully we can get the rest of these bolts out, and we just soaked them down in a little bit of penetrant. Hopefully we can get the rest of them out, and then we'll have to work on getting possibly an easy out in here like we did before. Kind of drill the center of the bolt, and hopefully we get an easy out in there to spin the rest of that bolt out. Now, thankfully, the heads are aluminum and the bolts are steel, so generally they won't meld into, you know, one unmovable fixture. But I mean, it can happen, but it would be a lot worse if the cylinder head was steel and the bolt was steel. Let's see. So we're going to let that soak for a little bit. And we're going to see if we can buzz off the rest of the, or break loose and buzz out the rest of these exhaust manifolds and get this exhaust manifold dropped. And then I'll bring you right back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see we got the rest of our exhaust bolts out. Got the exhaust manifold off here for the passenger side. I soaked it down a little bit just so we can get to it later, but you can see that's the rest of our broken bolt right there, pretty much flush with the cylinder head. So what we'll have to do is we'll have to punch it, put a little dimple in it, drill it out a little bit, and then see if we can get an easy out in it. And hopefully it'll back out. If not, well, you know, we'll have to go from there. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take the exhaust manifold off on the driver side, and just hopefully we don't have any broken bolts on there, but I'll bring you right back as soon as that's complete. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see that we got our driver's side exhaust manifold off. No broken bolts on that side, which is a good thing. The only issue we ran into was this shield is actually broken on the driver's side. It had one cap nut that didn't want to come off. It took the whole stud out with it, but no harm, no foul. But you can see on this side here that the eye is missing, and it actually had a correct thread pitch bolt, but the wrong bolt head. So it looks like somebody may have substituted their own bolt and just got rid of the eyelet on this side. But maybe as a side effect of that, you can see that it's starting to split, and that side's almost completely broke off at this point. So we'll have to get a replacement heat shield for the driver's side. Let's see. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get our head bolts out of here. And yes, I'm going to go get a 1/2-inch impact just to break the torque loose on these bolts. But I will follow the torque sequence that you would normally use to tighten them up to loosen it up, just to lessen any chance of... I think one of the running theories is that if you loosen up the head bolts, there's a potential there you might warp the head, things of that nature. So I don't know, just as a precaution, I'm going to, like I said, break these loose in the order that they would normally be torqued in, but I will be using a 1/2-inch torque wrench. I'm sorry, a 1/2-inch electric impact that you see me use before. Because again, these get torqued to about 100 to 105 plus or minus foot-pounds per head bolt. So they're in there. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and buzz these loose and get them loosened up. And then I'll bring it back when we take this one off, and that way we can see what's underneath. And also, don't forget, you've got these, let's see, you got these 4 smaller bolts up at the top that also secure your head. And if you haven't done so already, sorry, I know I'm rambling. This is that ground strap that goes between the 2 cylinder heads and then clips onto the body. We're going to go ahead and take that off while we're here. So let me get to work on getting some bolts out, and I'll bring you back just as we're getting ready to lift this head off. One moment. And welcome back. So we got our main bolts buzzed out, our main head bolts buzzed out, as well as our other supporting bolts that are up here at the top. In case you're curious what the torque sequence on that looks like. So that's the method that I removed them in. And we're going to see how much of a mess this is going to make. There may be coolant left in this block, or there may not. Or if there is, it may also be low enough that it won't actually leak anything. We've got to crack this loose. Now, when you get all your bolts out, which we have here, there's still a dowel pin. There's 2 dowel pins, one on each side, that kind of hold the cylinder head in place. So generally what I like to do is just kind of come in with just a small pry bar, and right here, usually on the passenger, usually on this side, normally you can do this on both heads, but hopefully I can show you this here. You can kind of get right up underneath the head, right up here in this little area, and then push up against the block, and you can see it's loose. It's ready to come out, so it's not too terribly stuck. You should be able to now just grab that cylinder head and pull it off. Now, be mindful, it may be made out of aluminum, but it's heavy. It's helpful to have that exhaust manifold off because it'll get rid of some of the weight, but still, even then. And also be careful when you're working inside of here. A lot of these edges, like this edge in here and these inside edges in here, they are sharp, and I mean sharp. So usually like to grab it just by the sides. There we go. Oh, there's some more of that coolant. Just kind of dripping out of the cylinder head. And there we go, and that actually doesn't look too terrible. It's not a lot of carbon buildup on this side. I mean, a little bit of carbon buildup, but it actually doesn't look too bad. That is our MLS gasket, or otherwise known as multi-layer steel gasket. And now the next thing that we can do, since we're on this side, is that we can get our little socket in here. And usually I like to use a 1/4 inch deep well socket just to get inside these lifter holders. And we can pull our lifters out next and do a little bit of an inspection on this side and kind of see what we get. And normally I like to put the cylinder heads upside down. I need to get something to set them on because they're leaking oil everywhere, but just so that way they're not, you know, laying face down and potentially damaging that, you know, that mating surface. So let me pause you. I'm going to go get a small ratchet set to take these little bolts up here at the top out. We'll get the holders out and look at some lifters. One moment. And welcome back. Yeah, I'm trying to do a little bit more live action in this video. Let me know in the comments if this is the kind of, you know, format you would like to see, or if you'd like to see maybe a mixed format. Generally, well, you know, as you will know if you've watched the channel, stop the camera and, you know, not show all the, you know, mundane wrenching type stuff. But now that we've got our top bolts loose, we should be able to get our holders out. Now, sometimes these lifters will come out with the holder, sometimes they won't, like you notice that one didn't there. But we should be able to grab our lifters and just pull them. So, if I remember correctly, 2468 from the forward back on the driver's side. So this is passenger side, so this should be all be odd, 1, 3, 5, and 7. So this is an MDS solenoid for the number 3 cylinder. It doesn't look too bad. No scoring. It's not loose. Can't really see the needle bearings in this one, so this is definitely a, I would say, an older lifter, because the newer lifter, and you'll see the difference when we go to do the assembly, you'll actually be able to see the needle bearings inside that lifter. Okay, let's get our next one out. It's also an MDS cylinder. It's also part of the same cylinder. So again, cylinder 3, one would have been intake, one would have been exhaust. Again, this one looks good. No pitting, no scarring. No sign of failure. Forgive the noises, I'm just dropping them into the tray below, but so this is the number one. Oh ho ho ho, look at this. Someone's done a lifter job on this engine. That explains why a lot of it's been taken apart before. See that hole right there, that bleed hole? That you will never find an OEM lifter. This is an aftermarket lifter. And it's one of the lifters that are sold that supposedly stop the what's referred to as a Hemi tick or the lifter failure. But if you go, and I'll put a link in the description, if you go and watch Model Muscle Extremes, they sell a lot of performance parts for Hemi motors, as well as the they have a YouTube channel. They test all of these lifters, and this is one of the lifters they test. That is a little kind of oil relief hole, and I don't like this kind of lifter because as it's traveling, and I forget what position within the cam movement it's doing this, but at one point that hole causes this lifter to dump all of its oil pressure. You basically lose about half the oil pressure in this lifter. But if you watch Model Muscles Extreme video, the comparison on these, you'll see why. But this has definitely got aftermarket lifters in it, so someone's been in here before. This has had an issue before. Yep, there's the other one. You can see some scoring. Lights, I mean, you can't catch it with a fingernail, so it looks like it's, yeah, okay, never mind. That's just lettering. It's just discolored. Let's take a look at what we got back here. Yep. And there it is. Okay, that's the MDS lifter. It's the other MDS lifter. Those look all right. So that noise we may have been hearing is probably perfectly normal, because again, the lifters that have the holes in them, they're constantly going to dump their oil pressure rather than maintain it at a certain point in the cycle. So that definitely explains why when it was left off, especially for an extended period of time, that you'd get a lot of loud clanking, because again, these lifters are going to bleed down in a second. Again, depending on where they're at in the travel, once they hit and line up where this hole is at, that's it. They dump out whatever oil pressure they've accumulated. Yep. Okay, but awesome. Well, it tells me at least, oh, sorry for the loud noises, it tells me at least that even though that this engine has had, looks like lifter failure in the past, someone cared enough to at least have it rebuilt and make it functional again. Now, obviously, when we do the rebuild, as we've already covered in our parts video, what we're going to do is we're going to go in with a set of non-MDS Hellcat lifters. So they will be the updated Mopar lifters, and like I said before, you'll see it in the video. When we do the assembly, you'll be able to actually visibly see those needle bearings in the side of that lifter. Okay, so what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and take care of the driver's side now as well. And I'll bring you along when I get the lifters out of that side, and we'll see if we'll see any failure. If we don't see any failure, then the issue for the clanking on the startups then would have been because of the holes in those aftermarket ones. But that would also explain why we don't see a lot of carbon deposits in our cylinders, because this has been a part, obviously, when they reassembled it, they must have went through and cleaned all this. And I'll have to get the machine shop to look at it. Hopefully Hopefully this hasn't been bored out already. We'll have to measure the cylinder bores or let the machine shop look at it, because my understanding is if it's been bored out 15 thousandths, then you can go 30 thousandths, but once it's been punched to 30 thousandths, you can't punch them any further. I mean, from what I'm seeing from the cylinder heads, I'm still seeing hash marks in the sides of what I can see. And like I said, this one ran fine. So as long as, even if it has been bored out, as long as they don't find an issue that they would have to come back and say, look, you know, we got some scoring here that we really need to bore out to get rid of, then hopefully this doesn't come back and be an issue. Probably not. I would assume if it had lifter failure, then more than likely all they did was just replace the lifters, replace the damaged camshaft, and kind of, you know, went on about their way. By the way, I'm going to work on the driver's side, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see we've got these are our lifters out of our driver's side. They look like they're the exact same type lifter. Although some of these MDS lifters, you can see the pin has started to rotate inside the bore. I'm not sure if that's good or bad. I don't think they're supposed to rotate, but that could be normal. So could be something, could be not. I did notice, however, on some of these, I'll see if I can find some more. It kind of had like a silverish type looking paste on it. Yeah, when you rub your fingers over it, you can feel the grit. So some of these definitely have a little bit of metal on them, or metal paste at this point. Now that could just be a remnants of previous lifter failure. If all that was done was the lifters were replaced and the cam was replaced and the engine wasn't cleaned, it could just be remnants of that debris still floating around the system. But either way, like I said before, this definitely had some work on it. These are definitely not OEM lifters. They're definitely aftermarket. So I think what we're going to do next, now that we've got the heads off, is that we can work on getting the oil pan dropped at this point, and then get the timing components off so we can go ahead and get that cam out at this point. So what I'm going to do is rotate the block here and let the rest of the coolant just kind of drain into our drip pan, and then I'll bring you back when we get ready to take the oil pan itself off, because we need to get the oil pan off in order to get the pickup tube unbolted from the bottom of the oil pump, and then we can kind of just go from there. But I'll bring you back in a moment. And welcome back. So I just want to show you this real quick. If you've seen previous videos, you've seen this engine stand before. But the reason why we went with this one was that this crank here on the side, it allows you to do stuff like this. Now we know we've got coolant still left in the block, but we kind of want to do a controlled roll of this. You can very slowly just kind of turn the crank little by little and kind of control the drip into our drip pan. And just kind of let that drain out. Yeah, it was a little, I think, I'll see if I can find a link to where I purchased this. I want to say that was a little bit on the pricey side. You're definitely going to pay a bit more for this than you will like one of the ones for Harbor Freight or something. But if you're going to be doing engine work like this, and you need to turn the engine upside down and kind of get access to it, I mean, I'll tell you what, turning that, that's about as easy as it gets right there. I don't know. I figured you might want to see it. I figured it was kind of interesting. But like I said, I'm going to just continue to do this to get the remaining coolant out of the block. And then I think what we'll do is we'll finish up topside. You'll notice I removed the electrical harness for our MDS solenoids. We're going to go ahead and take these solenoids out while we're here. And generally these get pretty frozen in place just due to heat cycles. But there's a kind of a trick that I saw on Reignited's YouTube channel, who is a Mopar technician, and he does a lot of very customized builds, and which we'll do this on camera, but you can whack these with a rubber mallet when you get the bolt out, and that'll kind of push them down a little bit and unseat and break the seal, and generally you can get these solenoids out without breaking them. But I'm going to continue to drain the coolant, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. I know I'm flipping around a little bit, but as you can see, as we were draining the excess coolant and oil by rotating the engine around, since we've got it upside down, waiting for everything just to kind of finally drip dry, so to speak, go ahead and just work on getting the bolts out to take our oil pan off. And it's about, I think it's 21 bolts total if you count the 4 we took off to get the timing cover off, and they're all just 10 millimeter. So what I'm going to do is just walk around and buzz these out, and I'll bring you back in a moment. And welcome back. So you can see we've got all our bolts out of our oil pan at this point. Now there are 4 spots on this block that typically get RTV sealant, and that's where the timing cover meets the block on both sides, and the rear main seal meets the block on both sides. Get the little strip of RTV before you set the windage tray / oil pan gasket in place, and then the oil pan itself. So that's going to cause it kind of to want to stay in place. So we're going to have to pry at the oil pan a little bit and, you know, do a little bit of work and see if we can get this out of here. Now, truth be told, I did order a replacement oil pan. We will be putting a new oil pan on this one. So even if we bend or ding this one, no harm, no foul. But what we don't want to do is, you know, gouge or mess up the mating surface on the bottom of the block that the seal goes on. Otherwise, we can run into potential issues getting this oil pan the seal later on. So what I'm going to do is just try to find a little corner to pry against, and then once we get this thing to crack loose, I'll bring you back. But let's try something. I'm just going to use the little trim removal tool here because it's got a nice thin edge on it. We're just going to see if we can tap it into this rear corner. Yeah, it looks like we can get under the sealant a little bit. And again, I'm not being very forceful with it. I want to just kind of mind what I'm doing. Yeah, we're getting it there. It's slowly but surely we're breaking it, but that's what we're fighting right now. It's just the RTV that's been put in each corners. So let me go ahead and continue to kind of fight with this, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So I just switched out to a kind of thin-ish trim removal tool and just working on driving it into this corner to get this seal, this RTV seal, to break free. This trim tool being plastic is going to be a bit safer to do this with than it would be like a piece of metal. Slowly getting there. There we go. Yeah, we're slowly breaking through that RTV. Again, I don't really care if we bend the oil pan by chance because we're going to replace it, but you know, just keep in mind that you might be in a little bit of fight depending on how much RTV the previous individual used on these 4 corners. But I'm going to continue to work on this, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So I figured in case you're also having troubles with this, just get it to unstick. I found the easiest thing, rubber mallet, and give it some good couple of swift taps right there on that corner with that timing cover removed. You can get to this corner of the oil pan. Just that if you're going to reuse this oil pan, just make sure that you don't overdo it and bend this in. As you can see, we now have that side uncaptured. And we now have that side uncaptured. So a couple of swift hits with our rubber mallet on the front corners seem to do it. And that is our oil pan. That is our windage tray and pickup tube. So what we want to do is get our pickup tube off next, unbolt it from the bottom of our oil pump. And then we'll see about getting this windage tray out of here. So let me get, well, actually we can do this without stopping the camera. Let's see. see, it is bigger than a, what is that, a 14? That's a 10, bigger than a 10. What I'm doing is just removing the oil pump to pickup tube bolt. Somebody's got some torque on it. There we go. We will be sure to bag and tag this one, and especially that one, because this one goes in the bottom of the oil pump for a pickup tube, and of course this one holds that pickup tube right there in the center. And that's the issue with trying to do an oil pump on a 5.7, or at least a truck 5.7, is this center support right here, because the sump on the 5.7 is towards the rear of the pan, versus on a car it's up front. So on the front the sump is a lot shorter, and what happens is you don't have that extra brace holding this tube in place. So you can actually undo the 4 oil pump bolts and kind of just turn the oil pump up enough to get this end here to kind of twist out, and you can get to the bolt underneath to switch that oil pump out without having to drop the oil pan. You can do it on a truck as well, if you just kind of have to deal with taking the 4 bolts out. Once you got your timing cover out, what you can do, and I've done this, is take the next couple of bolts out further down the line, and that sometimes gives you enough flex in the oil pan, you can push it out of the way to get to that bottom bolt. There we go, that's out. You can see we got our O-ring with it. Anytime you remove this pickup tube and put it back in, replace that O-ring. You do not want that O-ring to not work. You will have a very bad day. And I just saw something on the pickup tube I wanted to bring to your attention. See all that? See all that RTV? That is little bits and chunks of RTV that have been sucked up into the pickup screen. Basically, good thing was it didn't clog it all off, but it had a nice little, probably quarter size area that you saw there. I should say US style quarter size area that you saw there, that was basically being blocked off from being able to pick up any oil. So that would have been starving our pump for a little bit of oil. That's why you want to be careful with the amount of RTV that you put into these corners, because that over spillage will end up in the oil pan, and eventually it'll end up in the pickup tube, as you saw there. Okay, so I'm gonna have to work on getting this RTV broke loose on these 4 corners, and then we can get that windage tray out of there. So one moment, I'll bring you right back. And welcome back. So we got our windage tray off. We just had to work a trim removal tool underneath our corners here, and then once we got the RTV to pop free, then we're able to get the back RTV to pop free. So everything looks clean and good, and I'll pick the camera up here and show you. There you go. Hopefully you can see all that. You know, I'm not seeing anything out of the ordinary. I'm not seeing a lot of sludge, anything of that nature. It looks really, really clean. And then that's just paper towel from when me wiping the excess oil off of the surface. So like I said, it looks good to me, which I'm happy about. So again, that metal may be from the cam yet. We still need to get the rest of the front timing. Now that we have the pickup tube and everything off, we can get the oil pump out and start working on the remaining of the front timing components. Awesome. So let me get you resituated to the front, and then we'll start taking the front items apart. One moment. And welcome back. So we've taken our 13 millimeter bolts out from our oil pump here, which means we should now be able to do this and just remove it. And we're going to let that drain. And remember, we'll be going back with a Hellcat version of this pump, which will fit. If you've got a 2009 or later version of a Hemi, you can get a oil pump from the 6.2 liter supercharged Hellcat and change it out. And basically what it gives you is a higher volume of oil, and thus a higher oil pressure. And I want to say it gets to be about 90, almost 100 psi in the configuration. But you can see that the oil pump just splines to the crank timing gear, and if you remember in the previous video, we've got all new timing components to include this timing gear here. Okay, so what we want to take off next, we'll go ahead and get our guide and our tensioner off and to get this chain out of here. So I'll work on that and I'll bring you back. One moment. Sorry, I meant to mention one thing about this tensioner. If you're going to keep it and reuse it, you back it back up, and there's like a little pin that you can put back up here in the top that will hold it in and hold the tension back in. Remember, we're going to replace it in this case, so once I release it from here, it's going to sling forward and the spring's going to pop out of it, but I don't necessarily care because, again, we've got a new one to put on it, but just wanted to point that out. Bring it back in a bit. And welcome back. So you can see we got our tensioner and our guide off at this point. So now with no tension on the chain, should just be able to easily slip that off. There we go. And when we go to put the new chain on, I'll show you all the marks, but these chains have timing marks on them. Just to show you on this chain here, hopefully you can see that. You can see 2 marks on those 2 links, and there'll be a 3rd mark right there on that link, and that's what we'll use to line up our timing marks on our reassembly. Okay, now this lower sprocket should just slide off, and you can see it does. So awesome. It actually looks pretty smooth. You can definitely see wear on the teeth on this one, but it does have 112 plus thousand miles on it. Okay, so now what we got to do now is, let me pick you up there a little bit dark in the camera to see. I apologize. What we're going to do now is just we'll get an impact on here, buzz out our bolt for our cam phaser, and then once we have this off, we can get the thrust plate off behind it and then work towards getting that cam out of there. So let me get this buzzed out and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So there's our phaser, cam phaser. I'd strongly recommend the use of an impact if you've got one, electric or pneumatic, your choice, to get that out, because otherwise you'll have to hold this phaser still while you try to break that torque loose, and having an impact just makes a really quick job of it. Now the next thing we want to do is, let me get a shop light in here because it's getting a bit dark to see this. Hopefully this helps. It looks like it does, yes. So what we need to get off next is our thrust plate, our cam thrust plate, which is 4 Torx bits. Just be careful when you go to take these out. Make sure that your Torx bit is nice and seated, so that way it doesn't potentially slip and, you know, start stripping those out on you. So I'm gonna go get a Torx bit and I'll bring you right back. One moment. And welcome back. So I got you zoomed in. I've got two of them out. I just want to take the last two out, kind of catch you on camera and let you see what you're dealing with. Now these are torqued in, and I believe they are Loctited as well. So you'll hear a nice audible crack when they crack loose, which is why I was saying, since they are Torx, and it is a T30 Torx in this case, just why I was saying, just kind of give you an example as to why you want to make sure you got a good bite on these. There it goes. See, a nice audible crack. They are pretty tight. I mean, whoever put these in, they use their full He-Man strength on this one. I don't think they're supposed to be torqued down quite that tight. Yeah. Woo. Yeah, they're all right. They're not maimed at all, but yeah, they were, whew, those were in there. So now we should be able to take our thrust plate off. There we go. There she is. We'll be reusing this piece. Now there is a measurement you're supposed to do on these when you install the cam, and if it's out of spec, you're supposed to actually replace this. It's the movement forward and back. I think it's supposed to be between 1 and 5 millimeters, if I remember correctly. And if it's out of spec, meaning this is excessively worn, then that front to back play will be greater than that. In that case, you're supposed to replace it. Okay, but for now, I'm just going to put that over in our keep pile. Now, as far as getting the cam out, there's a couple different things that you can do. A lot of individuals will just thread the cam bolt back in and just kind of use that to pull the cam out. What I like to do, however, is to put the phaser back on here and just hand tighten the bolt. You don't have to get excessive with it, but just hand tighten it, and that way you can grab the entire, you know, meat of the phaser, and it just gives you more stability at that point and a little bit more to grab onto rather than just using the bolt itself. But let me pause you and I'll show you what I'm talking about. And here we are. So you can see that we've got our phaser reinstalled, and again, the bolt's just hand tight, and like I said, just to show you, it gives you the ability to grab that entire phaser and use it to your advantage to help, you know, work that cam out of there. Now you can do it with just a bolt if you want to do that, or they make a special tool that looks like a handle that will bolt on the front of the phaser and give you the ability to pull that out that way. But I like doing it this way. Again, it's just my preferred method. Let's see if we can get this cam rocked out of here, shall we? Ooh, almost. There we go. Now you probably saw me just doing a couple of light twists, and what I'm doing is just getting the head of this cam out of this first bearing. And sometimes I find you just have to rock it or twist it a little bit to kind of get it to go. And then once you have it, you can just kind of feel your way through, pick up on the cam as needed, so these lobes will clear without banging the tar out of your bearings. But remember, we're going to the machine shop and we're going to get all new cam bearings anyway. But not that that's an excuse for us to go all hardcore on this. But there you go. You can see that we got our cam out. And I mean, there's staining. Oh, there you go. Sorry. You can see there's staining on the lobes, but I don't see any gouges, so to speak. So I don't think our metal was coming from that. Again, it could just be residual metal. I'm just looking at the stamp on the back of this. Yeah, this is a factory cam. It's got a factory part number stamped on the back of it. And of course, as we commented in our parts video, we will be replacing this cam with a 2.5 stage high lift. Okay, but awesome. So let me put this thing down. I'm going to look at it more kind of off camera and just see if any of it is showing any kind of signs of wear. I mean, this first bearing that I can get to here is, yeah, there's some staining on it. There's a couple of areas, maybe right about in there, that I could kind of feel with my fingernail. But other than that, it's just some staining. Feels relatively smooth as well. Okay, awesome. But the good news is, that is it. I mean, that is, well, actually, no, it's not it. I'm sorry. Let me pause you, raise the camera up, and then we'll get the MDS solenoids out next. One moment. And welcome back. So we've got our screws out of our MDS solenoids at this point, and like I was telling you about earlier, we're just going to take a rubber mallet and just pop each one of these in, and then we should be able to remove them. You see, I don't know if you saw that one actually go down when I hit it. There we go. Now that they've been pushed down, that should break the seal. And we should be able to get them out without breaking them. Although, again, we're not putting them back in this build. This is going to be an MDS delete. Well, that didn't work. I'll tell you what, let me get the rest of that core out of there. And you see what happened there. Well, unfortunately, that trick normally does work. I've done this in a previous video. You see the body separated from the bottom. Let's see if we can get the rest of that out. I'll give the other ones another hit. Okay, what we may have to do on this one, yeah, now that it's kind of stuck in there, we'll just have to get a wood screw or a sheet screw in there and just screw down in the center of that to give us something to hold on to and finish pulling that solenoid out. But in the meantime, let's give these other ones another hit and see if we can get one of these to come out and be nice. Sorry if I'm covering up the camera. I kind of have to get in here and work on this. Well, that one broke too. Now I see these are going to be a pain. Okay, let me do this. Let me go get a screw that we can drive down in there and get these out, and I'll bring it right back. One moment. And welcome back. So just want to show you what I did is that if that solenoid breaks off from the body, which in this case it did, just use a wood screw, drove it in about 1/2 inch or so, And part of the problem that was holding these up, and I didn't discover it, you can't see it because the solenoid body was covering it, but there was like a ring of dirt and crud around the inside of this lip that was kind of sealing these in place. So I shot them a little WD-40, dug up the dirt, drove a screw in, like I said, about halfway, clipped it with a set of vice grips like this, took a wood handle of the hammer, just so we didn't damage the block, put it like this, and basically, once we got everything in place, and then just use the wood block as kind of a lever to then basically lever back the vice grip and use a little leverage, and was able to get both of those to pop out. So now we're going to try it again on the other two, and yeah, we'll see if they'll be willing to come out or if they're going to break like these did. So one moment, let me get you readjusted and I'll bring you back. And welcome back. So we got the first two MDF solenoid bits and pieces out. We're going to work on the next two. And I'm just going to do like we did on the last fit. Just hit the base of these with a little penetrating oil. In this case, we're using PB Blaster, not a sponsor. You feel free to use the lubrication of your choice. Okay. Obviously, if you need to reuse these, just be gentle when you take them out, or be prepared that you may have to, regardless of what you do, buy new ones. But typically, whacking them with a mallet like that will get them to kind of break free. There we go. See that one? Exactly what it was supposed to do. So I guess if I would add anything to the other technique, would be when you whack them with a hammer, shoot a little penetrating oil around the base of these, and you can see that's how they're supposed to come out. Okay, one moment, and then we'll see if we can get that fourth and final solenoid out of there. Okay, got it. Yep. Figured that was going to be, yeah, and I could see a lot of crud right on the inside lip again that just kind of gets hidden by the solenoid. So let me dig that dirt out and drive a screw in there, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we got that area cleaned up. It's already lubricated from before. So what I'm going to do is just try to show you this procedure, and just be patient with me. Because if you've got a better way of doing this, by all means, put it in the comments below. You can see the whole body is starting to spin, so it's kind of broken free. We'll see if that screws in deep enough now to give us a bite or not. It may not be. It may just end up pulling another piece of the center of it up. But let's get our vice grips adjusted here. Let's see, and if we go this way with it, yeah, we can leverage off of the wooden handle of our mallet. There we go, we're nice and locked. And then we can just kind of come this way. And what I did before was just take the end of the vice grips and just bump it. There we go. Yep. And you can see we're out. And just to show you a close-up of that, so we just drove a wood screw into the center of it, you know, deep enough that you can get a good bite. It doesn't have to go, you know, too terribly deep. Okay. And with that is the teardown of this block. Let me pause you and zoom you out and bring you back. Okay, and welcome back. So with that is the teardown of this block that has gotten into a short block scenario at this point. We have a couple minor things to do. We've got some sensors to remove, oil pressure, oil temp, no biggie there, the oil filter, and of course the crank sensor on the other side before we start prepping this thing to take it down to the machine shop. Of course, the machine shop will do a very nice job of cleaning the block up for us and then determining if they have to bore out or anything, and we'll advise them. Obviously, we're building this up to be a supercharged application, so they'll do what they need to do accordingly as far as the ring gap. And of course, once we get the short block back, it'll be just like when we did our 2009 build-up. We'll take that short block and obviously turn it back into a long block by taking everything you see here and slamming it all back together again. The cylinder heads, and I'll bring you over here to see those once again, is that they're actually really clean on the inside. Cleaner than I expected them to be. They're not nearly that carboned up. Hopefully you can see that okay. I'm sorry, I got you on a tripod and got you plugged into power at the same time because you're running low. But it shouldn't be too terrible of a job to get these scrubbed down. It's mostly just the dirt on the outside of them. And then what we'll do is we'll disassemble them like we have before. I'm still on the fence. I'm not quite sure if I want to buy new valves for these or not. I may. Either way, whether we go with new valves or use these valves, we'll go through the same process we did before. We'll lap each valve, and then we'll test them with a little bit of rubbing alcohol to make sure that they seal and they seal correctly before we do the final assembly. Of course, like I said, this is going to be a little bit of a long video, but I kind of wanted to put all this together in one piece just to show you that, at least to the level that I break them down when I bring them into the machine shop, it doesn't really take too long to get them down to this state. It just takes longer because I'm filming this and having to start and stop several times. But with that being said, I hope you found this information useful. If you have not subscribed, please consider to do so. For those of you who have already, I thank you immensely. And as far as channel support, because I keep getting asked questions every now and then about that, and for now, the easiest thing you can do, which is free, just cost you a little bit of time, is just let the ads run. Also, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please consider to do so. Again, it's free, doesn't cost you anything, or at least not at this point in time. It doesn't. So with that being said, I've got parts, engine parts and tools and everything scattered all over the floor of the garage right now that I need to start picking up and getting back in their place. And I'll bring you back over to take one more look at our disassembled engine block. Like I said, it looks like a lot, and I guess you can make the argument that, yeah, it is a little bit to do, but like I said, it's not horrible. Everything can be done with standard hand tools. The only time that we used an impact on this engine was just the front phaser to get that bolt more easily broken loose, and the front crankshaft pulley. Other than that, everything that we use today was just standard socket wrench and sockets. I'm sorry, and the head bolts. We did use the impact on the head bolts. So if you're going to be doing head work on this, you can use the standard breaker bar, but if you've got access to a 1/2 inch impact, I strongly suggest that you use it. Or if you've got a Milwaukee 3/8 inch, go for it. I think they're strong enough, they'll break these as well. But again, I'm rambling. I do apologize. Again, hopefully you found this helpful, and I will definitely bring you back for the next one. Thank you much. Bye.